Lena Peterson was the charming schoolteacher everyone adored. Mark Peterson was the hard-working husband who trusted her completely, until the day he found her Facebook password. What he uncovered led not just to betrayal, but to murder. This is the shocking story of how love, lies, and a single password turned a perfect marriage into a deadly nightmare. Lena Peterson had always been the kind of woman people admired. At 32, she carried herself with effortless charm, the kind that drew people in without even trying. Neighbors saw her walking their golden retriever, Daisy, every morning, waving at passing cars with a sunny smile. She volunteered at the local school where she taught, ran bake sales, and helped organize community events. Her social media was filled with photos of her with friends, her students, and, most often, her husband, Mark. Mark Peterson, a calm and dependable man in his mid-30s, worked as an insurance agent in town. His co-workers respected him for his patience and steady nature. He wasn't the loudest or most charismatic person in the room, but people trusted him, whether it was clients needing a policy or friends needing advice. Together, Lena and Mark appeared picture-perfect. Two attractive, successful people, living in a nice house on Maplewood Lane, complete with the dog, the garden, and the cheerful front porch light that was always on. From the outside, it seemed like they had it all. Photos from their vacations, a beach in Mexico, a cabin in the mountains, a weekend in New York, filled Lena's Facebook page, each one drawing comments like, "Couple goals," and "You two are perfect together." Friends and family believed it. The couple threw weekend barbecues, invited neighbors over for wine nights, and were always first to lend a hand when someone needed help moving or setting up a party. But as often happens, what people saw on the outside was only part of the truth. In recent months, Mark had started feeling a distance growing between them. It was small at first. Lena spent more time on her phone at night, scrolling through messages, smiling to herself. She laughed more often at something on her screen than at anything he said. Mark chalked it up to stress, or maybe just Lena needing her own space. After all, everyone was busy these days. He was working longer hours at the agency, trying to land a promotion, and Lena had her school projects and community work. Still, something didn't sit right. Mark noticed Lena would turn her phone face down when he entered the room. She locked the screen faster than before. She went out more often with friends he didn't know well, coming home late and brushing off his questions with cheerful but vague answers. Mark began to wonder if he was imagining things, if maybe he was just overthinking. After all, wasn't Lena allowed to have her own life? The truth was, Lena's online world was one Mark had never really been part of. She was far more active on social media, chatting with friends, posting stories, joining groups, and reconnecting with people from her past. Mark, on the other hand, hardly used Facebook. He'd never been interested in what Lena was doing online, until now. Late one afternoon, Mark arrived home earlier than usual. As he stepped through the door, he noticed Lena's laptop open on the dining table. She was outside, watering the plants. Mark glanced at the screen, his eyes catching on the open Facebook tab. His stomach tightened. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was a mix of curiosity and something darker, a creeping suspicion he hadn't wanted to admit even to himself. He took a step closer. The messages were right there, open, waiting. For a brief second, Mark hesitated. Then, heart pounding, he leaned in and read. Mark's eyes scanned the messages on Lena's screen, his hands trembling slightly as he scrolled. The name at the top of the chat was unfamiliar. Alex Rivera. Mark felt a cold wave of unease rush over him as he read the stream of intimate words and playful emojis. They weren't the kind of messages you sent to an old friend or casual acquaintance. They were filled with private jokes, suggestive comments, and plans to meet, things Lena had never mentioned. He sat down, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears. For a few minutes, he stayed frozen in front of the screen, rereading the messages, hoping somehow he had misunderstood. But the evidence was clear. Lena was having an affair. Mark's first instinct was to confront her immediately, but something stopped him. He felt sick, confused, and humiliated all at once. Instead of rushing outside, he quietly reached for his phone and took photos of the screen. He scrolled back, capturing older messages, saving everything. Then, he opened Lena's account settings and carefully noted down her password, saving it in a hidden folder on his phone. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He lay next to Lena, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He kept asking himself, why? Had he done something wrong? Had their life together grown stale without him realizing it? He replayed every moment of the past year, searching for signs he might have missed. The next few days were torture. Mark went to work, sat through meetings, smiled at clients, but inside, he was falling apart. At night, after Lena fell asleep, he quietly logged into her Facebook account on his phone. He read through every message, every photo, every detail. He learned that Lena and Alex had been talking for months. They had met by chance at a bookstore, exchanged social media, and from there the flirting had escalated. Mark discovered they had met in person several times. Once at a hotel just a few miles away, another time at a cafe where Lena claimed she was meeting a friend. He read messages where Lena complained about him, calling him boring and predictable, and expressing excitement about Alex's adventurous spirit. The betrayal cut deep. Mark felt anger boiling inside him, but it mixed with heartbreak and shame. He realized he didn't want to make a scene without proof. He needed time to figure out what to do next. Quietly, he began collecting evidence. He took more screenshots, printed out conversations at the office when no one was watching, and tucked the papers into a folder in his home office drawer. Lena, meanwhile, seemed completely unaware. She carried on as if nothing had changed, laughing, at dinner, texting late at night, occasionally giving Mark a quick kiss on the cheek before heading out to meet friends. Mark felt like he was living in a nightmare, watching his life crack apart, powerless to stop it. But something inside him hardened. Mark knew this couldn't go on forever. A confrontation was coming. He just didn't know yet how deadly it would be. Mark drifted through the days like a man underwater. Everything around him, the office meetings, the small talk with neighbors, the familiar routines at home, felt distant and muted. He moved through life on autopilot, all while carrying the unbearable weight of knowing his wife's secret. Every evening he came home, smiled faintly at Lena, and ate dinner without really tasting the food. He went through the motions of a husband, but inside he was unraveling. He continued gathering evidence, slipping more screenshots into the growing folder in his office. He printed photos, saved conversations, and even checked hotel receipts when Lena was out. The more he collected, the colder he grew toward her. He stopped laughing at her stories, avoided her gaze, and spent more time working late or locking himself away in his home office. Lena noticed the shift. She asked once or twice if something was wrong, but Mark simply shook his head, saying he was tired or stressed from work. Meanwhile, Lena's behavior grew bolder. She became more secretive with her phone, often stepping outside to take calls, or hiding in the bedroom to send messages. She started going out more often, claiming she was meeting friends or attending school meetings. Mark didn't challenge her. Not yet. But inside, his resentment was festering. The couple's home, once warm and full of shared laughter, grew cold and tense. Mark couldn't help but wonder if Lena even noticed how far apart they had drifted. Did she care? Was she planning to leave him? Or was she content living this double life, assuming Mark would never confront her? Every night, Mark lay awake, staring at the ceiling, playing through possible scenarios. Should he file for divorce? Should he demand answers? Should he confront Alex? But as the days passed, Mark's thinking shifted. He no longer wanted just an explanation. He wanted Lena to know that he knew. He wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, to face the truth she thought she could hide. What Mark didn't realize was that Lena was also growing anxious. She had started to sense that something was off. Mark's sudden coldness, his long hours in the office, his silence at home, it all made her uneasy. She began checking his things when he wasn't home, glancing through his drawers, peeking at his emails. She could feel the walls closing in, though she couldn't yet see the evidence Mark had carefully hidden away. Lena was no longer the relaxed, smiling wife the neighbors saw. Inside, she was panicking. She feared the affair would soon be exposed, that Mark would take everything, the house, the money, the reputation she worked so hard to build. And that fear began twisting inside her, darkening her thoughts. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were on a collision course. Two people living under the same roof, each guarding secrets, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Neither could imagine how violently it would end. The night it happened, the rain was steady and cold, tapping against the windows like a warning. Mark sat in his office, the folder of printed evidence resting heavily on his lap. He stared at the papers, each one a reminder of betrayal, the messages, the photos, the receipts. His hands shook slightly as he flipped through them, his mind racing. This was the night he would finally confront Lena. He had rehearsed it in his head 100 times. He would show her the folder, lay out the evidence, and demand the truth. Maybe it would lead to a messy argument, maybe she would break down and confess, maybe they would separate quietly. He didn't know, but he was ready to face it. What Mark didn't know was that Lena had been watching him all evening. Lena stood just outside the office door, hidden in the hallway shadows, her eyes fixed on Mark's figure hunched over the papers. Her heart pounded in her chest as realization sank in. Mark knew. He had discovered everything. She felt her throat tighten, panic clawing up inside her. She imagined the fallout, public embarrassment, a ruined career, losing her home, her friends, her reputation. It all flashed before her eyes. For Lena, there was no time left to think. She walked into the living room, her mind racing, her breathing shallow. She picked up the heavy metal statue on the shelf, a decorative piece they had bought years ago on vacation. It felt cold and solid in her hands. She tested its weight without even realizing it. Mark came out of the office, folder in hand, his face pale and tense. He took a slow step toward the living room, ready to face Lena, ready to finally speak the words that had been eating him alive. But Lena was already there, standing behind the couch, the statue clutched tightly. Mark paused, confused for a moment, seeing her standing so still, her eyes wide and locked on him. Before he could say a word, Lena stepped forward and swung the statue with both hands. The first blow landed on the side of Mark's head, a sickening crack filling the room. Mark staggered, the folder slipping from his grasp, papers scattering across the floor. Before he could react, Lena swung again, harder. This time, Mark crumpled to his knees, a groan escaping his lips as he tried to shield himself. Lena didn't stop. She brought the statue down a final time, her face twisted in panic and rage. Mark collapsed fully onto the floor, motionless, the blood pooling. Around his head, soaking into the edges of the fluttering papers. For a long moment, Lena just stood there, the statue still in her trembling hands, her chest heaving as she stared down at what she had done. The room was silent except for the sound of rain against the window and her own ragged breathing. Then, slowly, Lena began to move, stepping over Mark's body, already thinking about how to cover her tracks. Lena worked quickly, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. She grabbed a pair of gloves from the kitchen drawer and began wiping down the statue, careful to remove any fingerprints. Her mind raced as she moved through the house, staging a scene to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. She overturned chairs, pulled drawers halfway open, scattered a few valuables on the floor, and slipped some jewelry into her purse to make it look like items had been stolen. She checked the front door, unlocked it to suggest forced entry, then deliberately cracked a window in the back. Every step felt rushed, clumsy, but Lena convinced herself it was enough. When she finally called the police, her voice shook as she sobbed into the phone, telling them she had just come home to find her husband dead, the house ransacked, everything in chaos. The officers arrived within minutes, their flashing lights, casting harsh red and blue shadows across the rain-slicked street. Neighbors gathered at their windows, some stepping onto porches, drawn by the sudden commotion. Lena sat on the front steps, wrapped in a blanket, rocking slightly as she clutched herself and cried. At first, the officers believed her story. There were signs of forced entry, a house in disarray, a grieving wife who claimed to have found her husband bludgeoned to death. Detective Sarah Mitchell, the lead investigator, approached the case cautiously, though. Something about the scene felt off. Nothing of major value was missing. The television, laptops, and other electronics were untouched. The drawers looked staged, not truly searched. As the investigation unfolded, more questions arose. Mark's co-workers mentioned his recent withdrawal, his quiet mood, his long hours at the office. Friends spoke of Lena's late nights out, her distracted behavior. Small inconsistencies in Lena's timeline began to surface. Detective Mitchell's instincts told her that this wasn't a random break-in. The turning point came when investigators searched Mark's home office. There, tucked inside a drawer, they found the folder Mark had been collecting, the printed screenshots, messages, and photos, all documenting Lena's months-long affair with Alex Rivera. The folder was stained with blood, but its contents were intact. Confronted with the evidence, Lena's story quickly unraveled. Police tracked down Alex, who confirmed their affair but insisted he had nothing to do with the murder. Under pressure, Lena broke down and confessed. She admitted she had acted out of fear, terrified that Mark would expose her, take everything. From her, ruin her life. She had not planned to kill him, or so she claimed. But in a moment of panic, she snapped. Lena was arrested and later convicted of Mark's murder. The trial drew intense media attention, with headlines focusing on the betrayal, the affair, and the tragic downfall of what had once seemed like a perfect marriage. Neighbors were left stunned, unable to reconcile the Lena they thought they knew with the woman behind bars. In the end, what destroyed the Petersons wasn't just an affair. It was the power of secrets, the weight of betrayal, and a single password that opened the door to a deadly truth.